Well, hello again. I gotta cut this space heater off. It's burning up in here. Well, hello everyone again. I am excited to be back with you this week. It is a crazy time for me to even contemplate doing this because it is tax deadline. Like tomorrow is a deadline for S corps and partnerships. Taxes are due March 15th. So if you have not done that, you need to make sure that you get your extensions in ASAP. So that's just a tax tip from me, Katrina, your advisor. So today, what I wanted to talk to you guys about was a topic that I had talked about a while back, back in, I want to say maybe over a year ago. I talked about arbitraging versus owning short-term rentals. And the short-term rental space is changing drastically all the time. Short-term rentals, most of you already know, are properties that you rent for 7 days or less, right? So typically Airbnb, VRBO, platforms like that. You'll market the property, or some people have their own websites where they market from, right? But typically the largest one is Airbnb, and then VRBO comes in next. So arbitraging is so some people own their short-term rental properties, and then so short-term again is 7 days and under rentals, right? So what people are doing now, the scope of this space changes with real estate so much. This is why I love real estate. I got excited. So one of the things that's cool about real estate is, you can change how you do things. Traditionally we have the long-term rentals where you sign a lease, somebody pays you every month, and they have a fixed amount until that lease ends, and then you can either re-up at that same amount for the lease, or you can adjust the price up or down. Typically real estate appreciates most times, right? So that's traditional rentals. But short terms are anything 7 days and under. Typically, people are going to rent for just vacation stays and that sort of thing. And then there's a thing that you may have heard about too, is called a midterm rental. Those are typically greater than 7 days, but less than a year, right? Less than 6 months. What you find a lot of times with midterm rentals are where people are choosing to rent to people who are going to be there greater than 7 days, but they're not going to be moving in. They're not signing a lease for months on end. But midterm rentals, typically you'll have that with people are traveling nurses or traveling doctors. They're going to be there for a few months. What you find a lot of people are doing in this space is they're providing it to people who have been displaced because of with their insurance company. So say, for example, if somebody's house caught on fire, or they had some flood damage in their home, and their insurance company needs to put them up until till they can renovate their home. Well, it's cheaper for them to rent out a actual home, and it's probably more convenient, especially if you have a family, than having a hotel, right? So midterm rentals accommodate a lot of those that are in the and that have been displaced because of their insurance as well, and their insurance is paying for it a lot of times. So that's midterm rentals are greater than 7 days, but not a traditional rental where it's going to be like a 6 month lease. It could be a 6 month lease, but it's not going to be a year lease. You're not signing on the dotted line. But the cool thing is, so short-term rental. So what we're going to talk about today is, should you own the short-term rental or should you arbitrage? So arbitrage, I'm just talking to everybody from every level here, right? So arbitrage means that you don't actually own it, that you're kind of subletting it. So you've made a deal with the property owner that you're going to rent it out, but that you're going to rent it out to do short-term rentals or midterm rentals, or what have you. So basically you're subletting it, you're subleasing it. So you're leasing it from the actual owner, and then you're going to put it on a platform to lease out yourself, right? Which is phenomenal. And then if you own it, of course, you can choose to do short-term rentals or long-term rentals or midterm rentals or whatever you want to do, right? So what I want to talk about today is, what are the pros and cons between the two? Because you'll hear some people have a combination of both, And then some people strictly own the properties that they manage. And then some people just strictly arbitrage, right? And so, what are the pros and cons of that? So, I'm going to share my screen here. Hold on one sec. Hey guys, welcome to the live today. There we go. Look at me. These are new. I'm learning the StreamYard, guys, so bear with me. So the pros and cons of short-term rentals, right? And so a few of the things that you want to make sure that you're keeping in mind with short-term and long-term rentals is, hey Anna, how you doing, hon? So with arbitrage, let's just talk about some of the pros when you arbitrage, right? So arbitrage, you're subletting the property, right? So definitely with arbitrage, one of the main pros is you have a low startup cost. So you're not having to come in and get mortgage approval. You're not having to come in with these huge down payments and have all your background, your debt, and all those things checked. It's a quicker way to enter the space, right? To enter into the short term or mid-term rental space, because just the cost. Basically you're just negotiating with the owner what that price is going to be, what your down payment is, what your price to enter the space is going to be, your lease agreement, and then you're not doing, and you can get in pretty fast. It's not, typically a mortgage takes a little bit longer to do because you got to go through all of the credit approvals and all of those things and have down payments. So you have low startup costs to arbitrage. So what that also allows you to do, and you have a reduced financial risk with arbitrage as well, right? So so you're not paying for a lot of times you're not paying for the repairs, just depending on what terms you've worked out with the owner. The owner still owns the property, so if there's any city or mandates that say they have to come in and repair the sidewalk, or there's any city mandates that say they need to do these certain things, typically that's going to fall to the owner, not to the sublet, not to you who's subletting. If you're doing arbitrage, the owner is still responsible for the property itself. You're responsible for whatever your lease terms are. But typically there's a reduced financial risk because like I said, you're getting lower startup costs, and you're not having to do the mandatory things, operation, a lot of things that the owner itself would have to do. And you have flexibility because you can do as many arbitrages as you can afford to do, right? And so you can typically build that short-term rental business up pretty fast because you have the opportunity to turn over really, really quick. Okay. As opposed to you having to qualify for a new mortgage. It's pretty tough to qualify for multiple mortgages, right? Unless you're buying like a group of properties and that sort of thing. But arbitrage allows you to scale really, really quickly, right? Because you're just as much as you can afford, you can get into the next space really, really fast. And then you also have an opportunity for higher profit, right? Because you're typically doing renting the place out for a fixed amount, and then you have whatever you're bringing in on those rentals, daily rentals and monthly rentals, right? And so you have an opportunity to grow really, really fast, because a traditional owner that's doing a long-term rental, let's say that they're getting $1,500 a month, right? Whereas you on an arbitrage on a short-term rental, you may you may book it out for $200-300 a day, right? So you're gonna, and if it's a popular unit, you're gonna supersede that $1,500 a month really, really quickly. Hey, Arrington Walters, you said I own the tax benefits is worth it. Drawback limited to the amount of Airbnb can own. Absolutely, absolutely, definitely. And so the arbitrage is, some people are doing a combo because of that, right? Because the own, you can only move as fast as your credit allows, your money allows, and whatever the rules allow too, what type of loan you're getting, right? So certain loans don't allow you to qualify for a new loan that fast, right? So just depending on what type of loan you're getting, right? And so you do have an opportunity with arbitrage to grow faster, get some additional and bring in the higher profits, right? And you're paying just that monthly rent, right? And then the cons of arbitrage, because for every pro, there's a con, right? So the cons of arbitrage is a lack of control, right? The owner still owns the property. Oh, thank you, Arrington. Great job. Great camera. Awesome info. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. I am sitting here, but this weather is so weird. I'm in Michigan and it's been 70 most of the week and now it's rain. And so my temperatures in the house are all off. So I'm kind of hot, kind of cool. But thanks for that. Lack of control. And as a business owner, you want control a lot of times, right? So you're kind of at the whim of the owner, the county that you're in, the city that you're in. Those regulations can change, and then you have some restrictions. So that's the other con is lease restrictions, right? You can't, the owner may say, look, don't put holes in my wall, don't paint, don't do these things. So then you have to try to kind of decorate around do limited modifications because you can't really go in and just redo everything in the way that you want to, right? So there's some restrictions there. And then just operational challenges, right, too. So if there's some things that go on that you can't, you don't have authority to make changes on, that could delay your growth in the business as well. So say, for example, if the furnace is out and you're kind of trying to figure out who's responsible for that, is it you or the owner? You're kind of off, or the air conditioner is out if you're in a warm place, right? And then you're trying to find out. So you kind of have to pause the rentals until you figure out who's going to be taking care of this and all of those things, right? So just some operational challenges. And then the uncertainty of the market, just what's happening in the economy as far as the rules in different areas with short-term rentals. A lot of places have implemented taxes, where the hotel tax, where they want to get additional, the county wants to get some money, the city. So hotel tax, or some places have restricted Airbnbs or short-term rentals altogether, right? They say that it's impacting the housing market, or that they haven't figured out a way to bring in money on it, right? So they're just canceling it out. Or the other one that you hear a lot is that the type of people that are staying at them is bringing, it's causing problems in the neighborhoods that they're in, right? So a lot of families in residential neighborhoods are saying that they don't want, short-term rental owners that come in, have parties, loud music, all of that stuff. So they're putting restrictions in place. So then that leads to uncertainty for your business, right? And then depreciation is a big one for arbitrage. You don't have the ability to depreciate the property because you're not the owner of the property. So that's a huge hit. So the pros are really, really good. You get to get in the market, get really fast. You can get your business up and running, relatively reasonably priced. But there are some cons there, right? So depreciation being one, as far as tax savings, right? So because there are certain things that you can do to accelerate their depreciation in the short-term rental space has a loophole in it, right? So I won't talk about that too much on this particular live. I just want to tell you about the pros and cons, but we'll cover those later. But let's talk about if you own the property. If you own the property, what are some of the pros? Well, you have a long-term investment, right? That real estate is an amazing investment. I recommend everybody at least have, if you're interested, you don't have to be a landlord. That's not for everybody. But you could be a landlord that sublets to somebody that wants to do this, right? Maybe you don't want to do the hosting on a short-term rental, but you do know that there is additional capital that you can gain from that. So say from the owned space, what a lot of owners will do, even when they're letting somebody else do arbitrage in their spaces, they may not want to do the hosting, right? They may either have somebody do the hosting, or they may just go ahead and sublet it out to someone who wants to do arbitrage, but they can price it a little bit higher than they would be able to. You would be able to price it higher than you would be able to if it was just a traditional long-term rental, right? So if it's a traditional long-term rental, you're set at a fixed rate. What's the going rate in that market? Whereas if it's going to be in the short-term rental space, if it's going to be placed on these platforms, you can charge a little bit higher because you know that it's going to be turning over relatively quickly, and that's capital every time it turns over, right? So that's revenue. So it's a higher revenue. You're going to bring in a higher revenue as opposed to doing your traditional monthly fixed lease. Okay. But you have that long-term investment as an owner, and then you have control over the property. It's your property. So if you want to knock walls out, if you want to add additions on, if you want to close certain spaces off, if you want to you put skylights in, you can. It's all of those things, all those things that you're putting into that space. Those are the benefits for you. Whereas if you arbitrage, A, you got to ask permission to make these updates. And B, you don't own the space. So you don't want to put too much money into the space. You just want to make it nice, but you don't want to just cost yourself more money for things that you don't own, right? There's no equity in it for you, right? As an arbitrager. But as an owner, those improvements that you make, those are tax savings for you, right? And it's also adds value to the property over time for you, right? Because this is your investment, your long-term investment. And also you're building equity in the property. Every month that you're paying that mortgage, you're building equity, and the value goes up on that property. That's equity for you, right? So there's money available to you for retirement later, or if you need to pull money out and maybe you want to invest in another property, or maybe you want to invest in other businesses, right? Or maybe you want to take a trip. Right? So there's equity building every month that you're making your payment, every month that the market changes. Real estate is an up and down, vehicle. However, it mostly appreciates, right? We have market crashes and things like that. But the one thing for sure, it always goes back up in real estate. Okay. So it's a vehicle that you want to have because the growth potential is always there. And then you have flexibility as the owner, right? So maybe you want to test out short-term rentals or mid-term rentals, and then maybe you find that it's not for you. You want to go back to traditional space. You can do that because you own the property and you can make those decisions because you know where your fixed mortgage is every month, or maybe you have it paid off. So you don't have as much on the line as somebody doing arbitrage where they have to have that property be on the short-term rental space because they have to make their payment to you, right? The owner. So as an arbitrager, you have this payment that you have to the owner every month, regardless to whether you had any rentals or not. Whereas if you're the owner, you have your mortgage payment or maybe it's paid off. So you're not as tied to having to have all this turnover in the short-term space either, right? So you do have some flexibility there. And then the best part as an owner, you have depreciation, right? You get to write that property off. You get to write all the improvements you make to your property off. So you replace the roof, you get to depreciate that roof. You get to depreciate that property itself, right? So you have a huge advantage as an owner to accelerate your tax savings. And then there's a short-term rental loophole where you can really accelerate your tax savings in year one, right? So we'll talk about that later, but I just want you to know, as an owner, depreciation is going to be a huge advantage, not just in the revenue space every month, but just on the long-term space as far as the tax savings that happen on top of it. Cool, right? Let's talk about the cons because there are some cons too, right? So as an owner, you have higher upfront costs. Remember, you got to finance this thing, right? You got to give a proof for a mortgage. You've got to pay down payments. You got to prove that you're credible for this financing, right? So there's a higher upfront cost, not only and also to mention higher upfront costs, and then a higher requirements for you to even get into the space, right? And then also the operational responsibility as the owner, you're responsible for everything, right? So if something breaks down, you're on the hook for it. Whereas if you're an arbitrage, maybe you can reach out to the owner to talk about, hey, this is broken. This is this is probably on your space, right? But as the owner, it all belongs to you. So regardless to even if you sublet it, you're still responsible operationally for those things. So that is a big con, right? Good and bad at the same time. You have control, but ultimately you're left holding the bag, right? And then just the exposure to risk. right? So you're the owner of the property. So you need to make sure that you're insured properly for having guests in the home, right? Because ultimately, if you don't have the right structures in place, like LLCs and that sort of thing, you could have the risk of impacting your personal assets, not only just the rental property itself, if somebody gets hurt and sues or anything. So making sure that you have liability protection all around, because you do have a risk exposure. Okay. And then limited scalability is a huge con with owning. You can't buy properties back to back to back to back to back, month after month, typically, right? Unless you got some bank. and but as an arbitrager, you can. Is you just find owners that are, open to the idea of leasing out to you, right? So you can scale really quickly. Whereas when you own, the probably the most you're going to scale is 1 to 2 properties per year, right? Because you need to be able to acquire those properties. And remember, the one of the other cons was higher startup costs. So same thing applies. It's kind of like those two things kind of go hand in hand: scalability and costs. So those are things that I wanted to highlight. And then one of the things that I've been noticing too is a lot of people are shifting to that midterm space, right? Because then they're having it's less cost as far as the daily cleanings, and I mean not the daily cleanings, the cleanings as people leave, right? Because if somebody's going to be there for a couple months, you're not having a cleaner go in. You'll probably still have a cleaner go in from time to time, but you're not having a guest there 2 days and have a cleaner come in, and a guest come in for 1 day and have a cleaner come in. So typically you're going to have a cleaner come out maybe once, maybe twice a week, right? And that's basically based upon, what your terms of service are too, because maybe your guest doesn't want a cleaner in there, but from time to time you're going to want to get somebody in there just to make sure that you're keeping the space up. Right. And so midterm rentals has been becoming pretty attractive for people. And especially since a lot of times these are professionals that are using the service, and families. So you typically have not a party house, right? Because a lot of times that's what people are worried about. Like, I don't want the party house. And even though people build these things for parties, a lot of times, the advertisements say scream party. If you have theme rooms, but a lot of times you have to be very mindful of, what you're promoting in your spaces, and protecting yourself. I think that I'll let that live on. And then the other thing I think too, so midterm rentals, like I said, you're dealing with professionals, you're dealing with families, and a lot of times with the families, it's insurance related. So the insurance company is typically paying. And of course, those are pretty much, those are higher payments sometimes. You'll tell them what your daily rate is, and they're paying you that daily rate, right? So it's definitely far more than you're going to get as a long-term traditional rental, and then less headache that you're going to get with a short-term rental, because you're not having to talk to all these different people, you're not having all these different cleaning services, you're not having all this wear and tear. That's the main thing that you have to think about too with these properties. Since you have people coming in, it's a hotel almost. So there's different people, and everybody uses things different. Some people are heavy-handed with your faucets, and you're like, how's this thing keep breaking? But it's just because it's human. You got all these different people coming through the home, and then you have to do the clean, and then the sanitation of that every time too. So usually the biggest cost, you guys know this, in this space is cleaning. Right after that is typically just maintenance and repairs, right? Because you're just going to have wear and tear when you have people in your space. If you guys have any questions, feel free to message me or put it in the comments section below. If you want this slide that I have pulled up, also just message me and say, hey, give me a copy, all right? Or I may put a link in the description for you to download it as well. So I'll try to do that, right? Well, it's been my pleasure to be with you today. I'm going to get back to work again, but I will see you next week. And I'm going to drop some more tidbits on this as we go. But let me know any questions you have. I want to make sure that you guys are well versed in this space before entering it. or if you're already in this space, understand what you've gotten yourself into and make the best of it, right? Because it is a lucrative space and you can do very well in it. You just want to make sure that you have all your I's dotted and your T's crossed, and we'll make that happen for you. So look forward to seeing you next week, and I will see you then. Have a great one. Talk to you later. Bye bye.